Before we talk about body language, let's talk about the bigger context. And it's this idea that communication is multi-dimensional. 55% of how we communicate is through our body language. And the breakdowns are not super scientific. They are, percentages that I've seen in other places. So we're just going to use this for our purposes. But 55% of how we communicate, of the message that someone receives, is visual. It's what they see. That means our facial expression, that means our gestures, and our posture. 38% is voice and tone. Think about audio, not the words we're using, but the sound that we are making. This means how fast we are speaking, whether we are monotone or if we have some modulation. Maybe when we get to a place that feels exciting, you can hear it in the voice. Or in the same way, I have some really serious news to share. You hear that in the voice and tone. And 7% of the message that we communicate is through our words or our language. And most of the time, when we think about communication, we're often trying to get the words right. What are the words I should use in order to convey this message? When that's only a very small percent of the total communication package. Now, the first time I heard this, I was a little unsure if that was true. And one of the things that I realized is that if you think about what happens when you were born and you learned to communicate, language was the very last piece of the puzzle. You learned to communicate and you were a very effective communicator, and you were relying on something else. You were relying on what you could see. You were relying on what you could hear, how people responded to you. You could express yourself visually through your gestures, through your facial expressions. You could also communicate through sound, not language, because that took at least a year to begin to really learn to work with language. But you could communicate with sound, and you could understand what the people around you could understand something from them because of the quality of sound that they were communicating to you. And so if we remember that every human gets language last, but the visual, the audio, the way that we see and the things that we hear, that helps us to understand and to remember what is being communicated. So, what you say, that's just the words. How you say it is everything else. And another way to think of this, we could take a simple sentence, and if we keep the words the same, but we change the tone, the voice of it, and we're going to also change and play with the facial expression, the physical gestures, and the posture. So I'll play with the body language. You can see how the same words deliver a very different message. I didn't steal his money. 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 Oh, I didn't steal his money. Right? Same words, different meaning every single time. You can also think of it like this, like if you got a text message from someone and it just said, "Can we talk?" You wouldn't know how to feel about that because you can't hear the tone in their voice. You can't see the expression or their body language. And so you don't really know, like, what are you communicating? I know you're asking if we can talk, but I'm not really sure how to feel about this. That's why we use emojis. emojis in our written messaging becomes a way to convey body language and sometimes even a sense of tone of voice, right? Is it like joyful or is it grim, severe, anxious? So we're always working with these different levels. We're always looking for clues that tell us what the words mean and how we should feel about them. So for body language, when you realize it's about what I'm conveying through my facial expression and how I'm using my gestures, ideally, the gestures that you use should support the message that you want to send. And you might even notice throughout this video, I've been using my gestures very intentionally. If I didn't use my hands at all, I would just be a talking head. And if I kept my head very still, it would become even more visually boring. Part of what happens when we begin to use our gestures or we begin to include your physicality in the way that you communicate is it makes your message more interesting. You know, as a human, when things become very similar, when there's something that is monotone, we tend to tune out. Our brain is like, oh, I got it. I know what that is. I wonder what's happening over there, you know, and that's fine. Just realize that when we want to keep interest or when we want to make it easier for someone to remember the message, then we can use our gestures, our posture, our facial expression in order to support whatever message we're saying. So, for example, if you are talking about your career journey, you might use the idea of physical space and like a physical timeline with your hands. So you might gesture, well, I used to work in this industry, and then after X, Y, and Z, I'm now doing this. Or I'm currently working here, I'm looking to do this, and I came from this background. Really simple, right? It shouldn't distract. It shouldn't be like, what is she doing with her hands? It should make sense. In the past, I did this. Today I'm here and I'm looking for this, you know? Oh, I just got back from being overseas and I'm planning a trip next week. And right now I am here, right? There are so many ways we can use that before, future, present, right? Or before, after, and now. In the beginning, it was like this, and now it's like this. So there are lots of ways. You can think of it as too when you're using any words around size. It was a huge, huge mistake. Oh, it was a small, what's one small thing, right? There was one small thing that made a huge difference. And so once you start thinking in that way, this idea of how can I use my gestures to increase the the ease with which someone can hear me, it becomes almost a little more like intuitive. And so then you don't have to overthink it or really rack your brain. I think if you are intentionally wanting to develop your body language, a good place to do it is with something that you for sure know you will be talking about. So this might be around an introduction. When someone asks, oh, it's like, what do you do? Or tell me about yourself. When you can prepare in advance for what you want to say, you can start to map some shift, some movement to that. If you're also a person who tends to have like a default facial expression, it's good to be mindful of that too. For some folks, their default expression is a smile. Like even when they're nervous, they smile. Like that's their default kind of safe place. And you might realize, ugh, like smiling all the time, sometimes that doesn't match my message. Maybe I'm nervous and so I smile. And so we might think, okay, I want to remember to relax. It might just be a little more flat. And that's just at your home base, your comfort zone. And you might realize, oh, I want to convey enthusiasm or excitement, or I want to convey something. I want to like change my facial expression when I talk about this thing. Oh, as I'm saying this, it makes me think too. Sometimes if we've had a bad experience, we want to be mindful of what our face is revealing. So if someone says, "Oh, tell us why you left that, that job. Why did you leave that company?" And if I say, "Well, leadership was going down a really bad road and I thought they were making terrible decisions, so I had to get out." Right? That's going to maybe reveal something you didn't want to reveal. Or if you say, "Well, I was just looking for a new opportunity." Like it might convey like, oh, like that person maybe just got bored, right? As opposed to, I was looking for a new opportunity. I had done all these things. I was looking to do something new. And so I wanted to find a place where I could bring all of these experiences into service in this way, right? The same words can create a different message based on the cues, like the visual cues and the sound cues that you are delivering that message with. So that is like a start. That's an introduction to body language. And sometimes, too, the best body language, you don't really even notice it. You just really like get the message and are with the message. I've sometimes noticed how now I tend to notice the absence of body language is very strange to me. And you can see it with people who are maybe not accustomed to presenting in an engaging way. They just, are kind of on screen and they say things, but you're like, are you tied to the chair? Why are you not moving? Like you're a human. Move. Make your message come alive. It doesn't have to be really big and performative, but we want the message to, or rather, we want the movement to match the message, right? So, something to think about, something to play with, something to notice. And that's what I wanted to share.